Welcome. We are opening the files today on a figure whose life story, really, it perfectly encapsulates the radical cultural and political shifts of nearly a century. We're talking about Brigitte Anne-Marie Bardot, or, Gaby. Her story spans from her birth in 1934 to her death just recently in 2025. She was 91.
And what we're doing here is a really intensive review of the source material. We're trying to trace the complex and often, I would say, contradictory path she forged.
It's almost a narrative of two completely different public lives, isn't it?
It really is. Two sometimes violently opposed lives. For 2 decades, you have the global screen legend.
The actress.
The actress who made 47 films, recorded over 60 songs, and was just instantly recognizable all over the world.
And then after 1973, a complete shift.
A total 180. She just stepped away from it all to become this fierce and frequently uncompromising animal rights campaigner.
So our mission in looking at these sources is to really chart the evolution and, I guess, the friction between those two eras. And when we focus on that initial persona, the whole sex kitten thing, you have to acknowledge her influence was far, far beyond your typical celebrity.
Oh, absolutely. We have sources quoting French President Charles de Gaulle, of all people.
Which is just amazing in itself.
It is. He called her the French export as important as Renault cars.
Think about that. That is an extraordinary statement for a major political leader to make about an actress.
It really speaks volumes, doesn't it, about her cultural weight in post-war France. She wasn't just entertainment.
Yeah.
She was a symbol of renewed French confidence, of a new kind of liberty, and you see the intellectual community reacting to this almost immediately.
Right. This wasn't just popular culture.
Not at all. In 1959, the philosopher Simone de Beauvoir published her essay, The Lolita Syndrome.
And it was all about Bardot.
It centered entirely on Bardot. And Beauvoir didn't treat her like some starlet, She declared Bardot a locomotive of women's history.
A locomotive of women's history.
Yeah! She labeled her the most liberated woman of France at that time. She saw Bardot as embodying this kind of existentialist freedom, rejecting bourgeois morality, and really fundamentally challenging the social contract.
It is just fascinating to see this global icon of rebellion and freedom emerge from what was essentially a cage of strict privileged conservatism.
It's the core paradox of her early life.
So let's unpack that environment she grew up in.
Bardot's early life was defined by extreme privilege, but also an equally extreme rigidity.
Okay, so where did she grow up?
In Paris. In the 16th arrondissement, which, for anyone who doesn't know Paris, you should know is considered the most exclusive, conservative, and tradition-bound residential district.
So old money.
Very old money. Her family was prosperous, devoutly Catholic, and they lived in this massive 7-bedroom apartment.
This sounds like a setting where rules were,
Yeah.
well, they were everything. The defining feature of daily life.
Absolutely. Her father was a successful engineer who owned several industrial factories, and he demanded adherence to these incredibly strict behavioral and social standards.
For example?
Oh, table manners were paramount. Conversation topics were highly filtered, and her mother was obsessively selective about her companions.
So she didn't have many friends.
The sources suggest she had virtually no genuine childhood friends outside of her immediate family. It seems that prosperity came at the cost of any real emotional connection.
And there is one specific, deeply traumatic incident from her childhood that she herself really pinpointed as the breaking point.
Yes.
The moment that planted the seeds of her future rebellious lifestyle. It involved a family heirloom, right?
That's right, the broken vase incident. She and her younger sister, Mijanu, were playing, probably a bit too rambunctiously for their parents' taste.
They broke a vase.
They shattered their parents' favorite vase. And the initial punishment was, well, medievally severe. A physical 20-lash whipping.
20 lashes.
But the lasting, and I would argue more damaging consequence, was the psychological distance her father imposed after that.
So tell us about that psychological consequence. What did he do?
They were treated like strangers in their own home. They were forced to address their parents using the formal French second-person pronoun vous instead of the affectionate familiar tu.
Can you explain that shift?
Yeah.
Because it's more than just a word.
It's a huge linguistic shift. It's a mechanism to enforce distance, respect, subordination. For a child, that immediate and absolute estrangement to be forced to formally address the people who should offer unconditional love.
It must have been devastating.
It must have solidified this profound resentment she had toward that specific, rigid authority and that kind of traditional family structure. She said herself she never truly recovered from that feeling of abandonment.
It's so powerful how that incident, which is really about structure and control, immediately precedes her entry into the fluid, expressive world of art.
A world she could control.
And she was also dealing with a physical challenge, right? An early visual impairment.
Yes, specifically amblyopia, which is often called a lazy eye in her left eye.
So how did she get into art?
She channeled all of her energy, all of her focus into dance. During World War II, increased surveillance kept her confined to the apartment, so she became just engrossed in dancing to records.
And her mother saw this.
Her mother recognized this passion and arranged for formal lessons. And by 1949, at just 14, Bardot was accepted into the prestigious Conservatoire de Paris,
Wow.
where she studied ballet intensely for 3 years under the famous Russian choreographer Boris Knyazov. So this early dedication to performance, to movement, it was really the first crack in that rigid family shell.
And that training, it quickly led to public visibility. She transitioned from the controlled world of ballet to the, I guess, chaotic world of media.
Correct. In 1949, she was hired as a junior fashion model.
The junior model.
Yes, by Helene Gordon-Lazareff, who is the director of Elle magazine. Then, in March 1950, at just 15 years old, she appeared on the cover of Elle.
15.
And that exposure was the catalyst. It led almost immediately to her first acting offer for a film called Les Lauriers sont coupés.
And her parents, I'm guessing, were not thrilled with the idea of her becoming an actress.
Fiercely against it, they considered acting a disreputable profession, completely unsuitable for a girl from their social class.
But she had an ally.
An unexpected one, her grandfather. He supported her pursuit with a slightly cynical but, practical take. He said that if she was already destined to lead a reckless life, the cinema wouldn't be the primary cause of it. A realist.
And it was during the audition for that film that she met Roger Vadim, who was an assistant director at the time.
She didn't get the part, did she?
No, she didn't get the part, but the relationship with Vadim began soon after.
And the parental opposition to this romance was so absolute, it led to this incredibly dramatic and life-altering confrontation.
It culminated in her father demanding she end the relationship immediately. He actually bought her a one-way train ticket.
A one-way ticket.
Demanding she leave the next day to continue her education in England. And the sources recount Bardot's reaction as just this act of desperate, dramatic self-preservation.
What did she do? She went into the kitchen, and she put her head into an oven with the gas open.
That is just shocking.
It was an extreme demonstration of defiance. It forced her parents' hand, they intervened, they saved her, and they finally accepted the relationship.
But there was a condition.
The ultimate condition. She had to marry Vadim the moment she turned 18, and she did in December 1952. So this highly dramatic negotiation, it essentially secured her immediate escape from her parents' control and launched her into the entertainment industry. The price of her freedom was a premature marriage.
So she's married now, and the film career officially begins. Her first appearance was a small role in a 1952 comedy called Crazy for Love.
Right, and she earned 200,000 francs for it, which was about $575 at the time. Soon after that came Menina, the girl in the bikini. These were small steps, but they really rapidly built her profile.
These roles, even if they were minor, were crucial for establishing her image, weren't they?
Absolutely. By April 1953, she was generating significant media attention just by attending the Cannes Film Festival. She was deliberately cultivating this European star presence, and that visibility translated quickly into international roles.
Like what?
For instance, she played her first sizable English-language role in 1955's Doctor at Sea.
Oh, I know that one, a comedy.
A comedy that became the third most popular movie in Britain that year. So that exposed her to the very lucrative Anglo-American market.
And this early period is when she really cemented the iconic look, because she was a brunette initially, right?
She was, which is hard to picture now. But in 1956, while she was filming an Italian movie, Nero's Weekend, the director asked her to appear as a blonde for the role.
So she wore a wig.
Well, instead of using a wig, she dyed her hair. And she was so satisfied with the transformation, that golden, sort of effortless blonde look, that she decided to keep the color permanently.
And that decision was essential. The blonde bombshell persona became globally synonymous with her name.
Completely. And then came the true global explosion, the event that made her an icon.
And God created woman.
In 1956, this was the directorial debut of her husband, Roger Vadim, and she starred as Juliette Hardy, an amoral, uninhibited teenager in a deeply respectable small-town setting.
And the film's release was just a cultural seismic event. It wasn't just a movie.
It was a societal flashpoint. The sources highlight its immediate and immense impact. In Great Britain, it was listed among the 10 most popular films of 1957.
And the American reaction was even bigger.
Staggering and completely unexpected. You have to remember, at the time, foreign films rarely crossed over to the mass market in the U.S.
Sure.
Yet, And God Created Woman was the highest-grossing foreign film ever released in the United States up to that point. It earned $4 million.
Which was an astonishing amount of money back then for a foreign film.
It was an indicator of this American appetite for something scandalous, something unrestrained.
And it was scandalous. We're talking about U.S. theater managers actually being arrested for screening the film.
Yes, because of its content. Specifically, the implied nudity and the, uninhibited sexuality of her character.
So this combination of commercial dominance, controversy, and her refusal to conform.
It solidified her nickname, the Sex Kitten. She was seen as operating totally outside the bounds of conventional morality. As Paul O'Neill noted in Life magazine in 1958, the American public was ready, even hungry, for something racier and more realistic than the heavily censored conventional product Hollywood was making.
And she was packaged so perfectly by French photographers like Sam Levin.
And Cornell Lucas. They captured her natural, casual sex appeal, which was such a sharp contrast to the polished, manufactured glamour of the American stars.
And this overwhelming commercial power translated directly into massive financial leverage back home in France.
Oh, for sure. By 1958, Bardot wasn't just famous. She was the highest-paid actress in France.
And her later films kept that momentum going.
They did. Her subsequent films were enormous domestic hits. You look at the courtroom drama The Truth in 1960.
Right.
It was the third biggest commercial hit in France that year, and it earned her a prestigious David Di Donatello Award for Best Foreign Actress. That's Italy's highest film honor.
The production of that film was also famously dramatic, wasn't it?
It was a spectacle in itself. There were high-profile arguments, an affair, and reports that she attempted suicide during the intense filming schedule, which just further blurred the line between her turbulent private life and her public persona.
She also made sure that she worked with the most respected names in French cinema. She wasn't just a commercial star.
Absolutely. She sought out the auteurs like Jean-Luc Godard,
Le Mépris,
Contempt in 1963. This was an expensive film, explicitly aimed at the international market, backed by an American producer, Joseph E. Levine.
And she did comedy, too.
She demonstrated her range by co-starring with the equally legendary Jean Moreau in Louis Malle's Western buddy comedy Viva Maria in 1965. That role got her a BAFTA nomination for Best Foreign Actress, so she was constantly maneuvering to be seen as both a popular star and a serious actress.
But the sources show that while she conquered Europe, her attempts to crack mainstream Hollywood were less successful.
That's the critical distinction. Hollywood operated on different terms. They expected more control, a certain type of clean, manufactured star.
Right.
Her U.S.-centric Western, Shalako, in 1968, starring Sean Connery, was a box office disappointment internationally.
It just didn't connect.
It didn't resonate with the mass American audience the way but God Created Woman had as a kind of forbidden foreign import.
And there's an interesting anecdote from that set with Sean Connery.
Yes, she later shared that she rejected his advances during the production, stating simply she never succumbed to his charm.
Beyond film, her musical output was also incredibly influential. She was a true multimedia artist, especially with those edgy collaborations she did with Serge Gainsbourg.
The music was just as raw and provocative as her film persona. And the history surrounding their most famous collaboration, Je t'aime, moi non plus.
I love you. Me neither.
It's legendary. They recorded this very explicit duet, but Bardot, who was very conscious of her image and her marriage at the time to Gunter Sachs, she pleaded with Gainsbourg not to release it.
Because of the scandal?
Exactly. The potential scandal was huge. So he agreed, and he shelved her version.
Which led to Jane Birkin's version becoming the massive global hit.
Precisely. Gainsbourg re-recorded the song the following year with Jane Birkin, and that version became a massive, highly controversial hit all across Europe. It was banned by radio stations, but it was hugely popular anyway.
But Bardot's version did eventually come out.
It wasn't until 1986 that her original and arguably more sensual version was finally issued. And even decades later, her influence endured. In 2006, when Universal Music made its back catalog available online, her version of the song had this huge revival.
It was a popular download.
It was the third most popular download, decades after it was recorded.
So despite all this continued success in the early 1970s, she even did Don Juan, or Don Juan were a woman for Vadim in 1973. She made this definitive, very abrupt choice to just walk away.
She retired from acting in 1973 at the age of 39, immediately after filming the edifying and joyous story of Colonna.
And what was her reason?
She characterized the decision as a way to get out elegantly. She had completed 47 films, but her life in the spotlight as a sexual symbol, which she had grown weary of, was over. It was a radical act of self-determination, really, and it set the stage for her next chapter, which would prove far more controversial than any film she had ever made.
So the sources show that her public persona, this uninhibited free spirit, it masked a deeply turbulent and often unhappy private existence. We know she was married 4 times, to Roger Vadim, Jacques Charrier, Günter Sachs, and then Bernard Dormal. But the sources indicate something like 17 recorded romantic relationships overall during her most famous period.
Her philosophy on relationships was consistently self-centered and highly passionate. She viewed fidelity as secondary to intensity.
She said she was always looking for passion.
Exactly. And when the passion was getting lukewarm, she said she would pack her suitcase and leave. The initial marriages were famously short. Her first 3 averaged only about 3 years each.
It's only her final marriage to Bernard Dormal that lasted.
Right, which began much later in her life and seemed to offer a more lasting stability.
But the most challenging and painful part of her private life, and the one that brought her global condemnation later on, centered entirely on motherhood.
Yes.
Her only child, Nicolas Jacques Charrier, was born in 1960 during her marriage to Jacques Charrier, and the sources are extremely frank about her reaction to the pregnancy.
She was profoundly distressed. She had already publicly stated, "I am not a mother, nor do I want to be one."
And in 1960, abortion was illegal in France.
It was. So the sources recount her desperate attempts to end the pregnancy herself. She punched herself repeatedly in the stomach and repeatedly asked her doctor for morphine, hoping it would induce an abortion.
The level of psychological turmoil she was experiencing during this period is just astonishing. It's just a profound internal crisis regarding the expectations that were placed upon her as a woman.
It was a crisis she later translated into these shockingly raw public statements in her 1996 memoir, Initiales BB Memoir.
And those passages are brutal.
They are. She described the baby while she was pregnant as a cancerous tumor that she felt was destroying her.
And she said something even more stark than that.
She did. She wrote that she would have preferred to give birth to a little dog.
After Nicholas was born, and he was delivered at home because she desperately wanted to avoid the press, the difficulties did not get better.
Not at all. She suffered from severe postpartum depression and even attempted suicide during this period. She refused to breastfeed, and she noted in her memoir that whenever she held the baby, he seemed to sense her agitation and would just immediately begin to cry.
She admitted later she just wasn't ready.
A very raw statement of emotional incapacity. She said she was simply not adult enough to take care of a child.
And this difficult dynamic made the divorce from Charrier highly contentious. He ultimately gained sole custody of Nicholas.
Right, which led to a profound estrangement that lasted for decades. And the sources include this particularly heartbreaking incident from Nicholas's childhood.
What was that?
When Nicholas was about 12, he asked to stay with his mother, hoping for a connection.
And she said no.
She reportedly turned him away, preferring the company of her party guests. And this rejection wounded him so deeply that it initiated a long period of complete non-communication.
The estrangement was so severe that she wasn't at his wedding.
She was not invited to his wedding in 1984.
And this painful history became a matter of public record and eventually legal conflict decades later.
It did. In 1997, Cherry and Nicholas took legal action against Bardot and her publisher, Grasset.
For the comments in the autobiography.
Specifically for the hurtful remarks she had made about her son. And the legal action was successful. The court ordered Bardot and her publisher to pay combined fines of £28,000 to her ex-husband and son for the psychological damage. It showed that even decades later, the truth she revealed had lasting legal and personal ramifications.
But the sources do indicate a later softening, a degree of reconciliation between them.
They do. By 2018, the sources note that she and Nicholas were on good terms. They communicated regularly, they saw each other annually. Nicholas is a father himself now. He had daughters in 1985 and 1990. So while the relationship remained, let's say, distant, the deep freeze had thawed enough for regular communication.
So in 1973, she walks away from the camera, the glamour, the instability of the film world, and immediately steps into her second life.
Full-time, highly organized animal rights activism.
And this was a complete radical lifestyle overhaul. It included her conversion to vegetarianism.
It was a total, unyielding commitment. And crucially, she leveraged her immense celebrity and her accumulated wealth instantly for the cause. In 1986, she established the Brigitte Bardot Foundation for the Welfare and Protection of Animals.
And to launch this foundation, she took an extraordinary and very public financial step.
She did.
How was that?
She personally auctioned off her jewelry, her vintage clothing, her personal belongings, basically the relics of her former life. This sale raised 3 million francs, which was approximately US $430,000 at the time. This infusion of personal capital was how she seeded the foundation. It really demonstrated that her commitment was far from some celebrity vanity project.
No, this was a total transfer of resources from the icon to the activist.
Completely. And she then became an active, visible campaigner in the field, using her iconic status to generate global media attention for often overlooked issues.
Like the seals in Canada.
One of the most famous actions, this was in 1977, years before the foundation even existed. She traveled to Canada and joined an operation led by Paul Watson, who later founded the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society.
And her purpose was to condemn the massacre of seal pups.
Exactly. Bardot went directly onto the ice floe, posing dramatically next to the pups, and those photographs were immediately sent worldwide. They instantly linked her face to the cause of seal protection. It was a masterclass in using celebrity visual impact for advocacy.
And her commitment to Watson continued for decades.
It did. Even in 2024, she was still fighting for him, asking French President Emmanuel Macron to grant him political asylum after he faced detention in Greenland.
Her advocacy was far-reaching. It encompassed opposition to specific types of consumption and major international aid programs.
It did. She was famously against the consumption of horse meat, viewing horses as companion animals rather than livestock. And on the international stage, she provided substantial financial aid.
Like in Romania.
Exactly. She donated over $140,000 across 2 years, starting in 2001, to fund a mass neutering and adoption program for the stray dogs in Bucharest. There were an estimated 300,000 of them.
And she engaged directly with world leaders.
She appealed to Queen Margrethe II of Denmark in 2010 to halt the annual killing of dolphins in the Faroe Islands, which she called a macabre spectacle and a shame for Denmark.
Her foundation also got involved in protesting bullfighting in France.
Yes, in 2011, when the culture minister officially included bullfighting in France's cultural heritage, Bardot wrote this highly critical letter of protest, and her peers in activism really appreciated her efforts.
She had a boat named after her.
In 2011, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society renamed its fast interceptor vessel the MV Brigitte Bardot in profound appreciation of her decades of support, both financial and public.
However, this fierce advocacy was frequently complicated and often entirely overshadowed by her political alignment and her extremely controversial public declarations,
Right.
which led to a whole series of legal consequences.
This is the paradox that makes analyzing her life so difficult. She aligned herself explicitly with the French far-right political movement. She supported Marine Le Pen, even calling her the Joan of Arc of the 21st century.
And her husband was involved in that world too.
It's very relevant to note that her fourth husband, Bernard Dormal, was a former advisor to Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the National Front. So her political views became inextricably tied to her activism, and it created a severe public backlash.
So we need to objectively and impartially present the sequence of legal fines she received for inciting racial hatred, as it's all documented in the source material. This spans multiple decades.
The first series of fines began almost immediately after her transformation into an activist, which really highlights the immediate friction between her uncompromising views and French law. Beginning around 1997, she was fined multiple times.
In 97, 98, and 2000.
Yes, for comments that first appeared in Le Figaro and were later reprinted in her book Le Carré de Putain.
And what were the specific subjects of those comments?
They focused on two main areas. First, her criticism of the ritual slaughter of sheep required for certain religious holidays. And second, her statement that France was, again, invaded by an overpopulation of foreigners, especially Muslims.
And the fine for that?
The 2000 fine was 30,000 francs, or about $4,200. The courts found that while her focus might have been animal welfare, the language she used crossed the line into hate speech, targeting a specific population.
And the controversy escalated further with her 2003 book, Un cri dans le silence, A Cry in Silence.
This book was highly inflammatory. In it, she was openly critical of immigration of Islam and what she termed racial mixing.
She praised previous generations who had pushed out invaders.
And specifically attacked the idea of mixing genes. For these comments, she was convicted for a fourth time in 2004 for inciting racial hatred and fined €5,000.
It's important to note, though, she did offer an apology during that trial.
She did. She said she never knowingly wanted to hurt anybody.
But the pattern of coupling her animal advocacy with incendiary social commentary persisted, and it led to a fifth conviction.
It did. In 2008, she was convicted for a fifth time, resulting in a €15,000 fine. This was related to a letter she sent to Nicolas Sarkozy when he was Interior Minister.
And what did that letter say?
Well, it primarily focused on her objections to the ritual slaughter of sheep without anesthesia, but it included a paragraph stating that she was fed up with being under the thumb of this population, which is destroying us, destroying our country, and imposing its habits.
And the prosecutor at the time made a public comment about this pattern.
Yes, he commented that the judiciary was becoming weary of repeatedly having to charge Bardot with offenses related to racial hatred.
Her largest fine came more recently, just a few years before her death.
That fine was €20,000, and it was levied in 2021. It stemmed from a 2019 open letter she sent to the prefect of Réunion, which is a French overseas territory in the Indian Ocean.
Again, ostensibly about animal cruelty.
Yes, but in it, she referred to the inhabitants of Réunion as autochtones, who have kept the genes of savages, and explicitly associated certain local practices, like the beheadings of goats, with reminiscences of cannibalism from past centuries.
And the court found that language was clearly derogatory.
And racially targeted, yes.
So these legal issues really underscore the complete transformation of her public life. She went from being the face of radical sexual liberty to an individual whose uncompromising politically charged activism repeatedly resulted in legal convictions. Her personal rigidities were fully channeled into her public causes.
Right.
So even if we set aside the profound controversies of her later life, her legacy as a cultural and fashion icon is, well, it's absolutely undeniable. She truly defined the aesthetic of the 1950s and 60s, shifting global style and attitude.
Her influence on fashion is seismic. She didn't just wear clothing, she popularized entire movements. Most famously, of course, the bikini in the early 1950s.
Right.
She was photographed in one incessantly during the 1953 Cannes Film Festival. She wore one in her second film, Menina. And at that time, the bikini was still considered the razor's edge of decency in places like the United States. She was vital in making it mainstream.
And beyond specific garments, there are entire styles and silhouettes that are permanently tied to her name.
That's right. The Bardot neckline. That wide-open boat neck style that gracefully exposes both shoulders.
It's named after her.
Because of her popularization of the style in her films and public life, it was this sensual look that revealed skin without being overtly vulgar.
And her hair, the choucroute.
The huge, voluminous beehive-like hairstyle, she brought that into mass fashion, along with gingham prints.
From her wedding dress.
They became globally popular after she wore a pink and white checkered dress by the designer Jacques Estrel for her wedding to Jacques Cherrier. And she even inspired specific products, like the Repetto Shoe Company. They created a pair of custom ballet flats, the Cinderella ballerinas, specifically for her in 1956.
Her status was such that she was deemed worthy of literally becoming the face of the nation.
A rare honor indeed. From 1969 to 1972, Bardot's silhouette was selected to be the official face and bust model for Marianne.
The symbol of the French Republic.
Exactly. Before her, Marianne had been anonymous, chosen from models, but Bardot was the first official celebrity face of the Republic. It just reinforced her identity as an international symbol of France.
And her global popularity extended far beyond France itself.
Oh, she is undeniably credited with popularizing the small fishing village of Saint-Tropez.
Transforming it.
Completely transforming it into the international destination for the wealthy and famous that it remains today. And she lived there until her death. Her popularity even stretched to South America. She visited the remote Brazilian fishing town of Armação dos Búzios in 1964.
And they built a statue of her.
They later erected a statue of her by Cristina Mata, recognizing her role and putting them on the international map.
She was also a profound artistic muse for major figures across the creative spectrum, spanning fine art and music.
Her image was considered a modern work of art. She was the subject of 8 Andy Warhol paintings in 1974. One of these, the one commissioned by her ex-husband Gunter Sachs, was later estimated to be worth £4 million.
And in music.
The influence was immense. Bob Dylan, the Nobel laureate, dedicated the very first song he ever wrote to her, and he mentioned her by name in his song I Shall Be Free on his second album.
And the Beatles idolized her.
Oh, John Lennon and Paul McCartney were known to be completely infatuated with her. They even made concrete plans to shoot a feature film that would star both the Beatles and Bardot.
But the project never happened.
Sadly, it never materialized. She also created this distinct visual language in modeling, the iconic Bardot pose.
Can you describe that?
It was a famous modeling portrait from around 1960. She's sitting cross-legged, cross-armed, often dressed minimally in black pantyhose. And that pose has been consciously emulated countless times by modern global celebrities.
Like Rihanna and Gisele Bündchen.
Exactly. It shows her lasting visual influence on how female sexuality and confidence are portrayed in media.
And even in her later years, her life remained subject to public scrutiny, particularly her health decisions and her final public statements.
In 1984, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And significantly, reflecting her lifelong defiance of convention, she refused to undergo chemotherapy.
What did she opt for instead?
Only radiation therapy. She recovered in 1986. Her final public appearance of note was a 47-minute television interview in May 2025 at age 90. It was her first major interview in 11 years.
What were the notable points from that final conversation?
She discussed her good health, her continued commitment to animal rights, and a highly traditionalist view of technology. She confirmed she refused to use mobile phones or computers.
And even at 90, she maintained her provocative views on social movements, especially feminism.
She did. She reinforced her career-long criticism of what she called excessive or ideological feminist organizations, stating plainly, "Feminism isn't my thing. I like guys."
And she also made some controversial statements about contemporary legal issues.
Regarding sexual misconduct allegations against actors, yes, she said, "Those who have talent and put their hands on a girl's buttocks are relegated to the bottomless pit. We could at least let them continue to live." These comments just highlighted that even at the end of her life, that spirit of unorthodoxy and refusal to conform remained absolute, though it was often channeled into deeply conservative or politically incorrect opinions.
Brigitte Bardot died on 28 December 2025 at the age of 91 at her home in Saint-Tropez.
Her passing drew immediate international response. French President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute to her, calling her a legend of the century. The Société Protectrice des Animaux, France's oldest animal protection organization, described her as an iconic and passionate figure for the animal cause.
Quite a trajectory.
The trajectory of her life began with a fierce rebellion against domestic conservative structure, and it concluded with a profound, final commitment to a cause that was championed with an equally severe and uncompromising structure of belief.
So we've completed our intensive review, charting the two public lives of Brigitte Bardot. The sources reveal a life that moved from a revolutionary face of sexual freedom and reckless passion to a severe, morally rigid activist who faced multiple legal convictions for inciting racial hatred.
It's clear that her initial rebellion against the stifling conservative conventions of her upbringing didn't just vanish.
No.
It simply morphed into a new, equally unyielding set of uncompromising, publicly declared beliefs in her second life.
What's particularly striking is the power she realized she possessed.
I agree. She held a unique position, a cultural figure who fully leveraged her celebrity, the wealth, the name, the visual iconography, to fund and amplify her chosen cause, regardless of the personal cost or the considerable legal consequences.
Her entire life was a sustained performance of conviction.
That's a great way to put it. Whether she was embodying sexual liberty on screen or acting as the fierce, controversial voice for animals in the political arena.
So we leave you with this to reflect on. Bardot's image shaped global fashion and sexual attitudes for decades. Given the legal and social implications detailed in the sources regarding her political and racial commentary, what does her legacy teach us about the challenge of separating the enduring art and immense influence of an icon from the personal, often deeply flawed beliefs they choose to champion?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? When studying a figure so globally influential yet so deeply controversial.
Thanks for listening.